Good afternoon, folks, and welcome to the last Pervasive Media Studio lunchtime talk of 2024. Come on, they're not that bad.
I can see how you read that.
These talks are live every Friday at 1 p.m, both here in the building and live online. Hi online, folks. So whether you're in Bristol or you're far away, you can join in the conversation. So my name's Martin O'Leary. I am the studio community lead here at the Pervasive Media Studio. I'm a white man in my 40s, long hair and a beard, wearing a t-shirt that I have previously described as dark blue on this intro, but actually I've been told is black, and I have seen the receipts and it says, yes, the shop did say it was black, but I'm sorry to anyone who I've gaslit about the color of this previously. Every Friday, we throw open the doors of the Pervasive Media Studio for Open Studio Friday, where we offer you the chance to spend some time in the space by hot desking alongside our residents and staff from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. So an especially big welcome to anyone who's new to the studio. Can anyone who's new to the studio put your hand up? All right, a couple of you. This bit is for you. What is the Pervasive Media Studio? We're a diverse and collaborative community exploring creativity and technology, everything from comedy to coding and product development to performance art. And we're a partnership between Watershed, UE Bristol and the University of Bristol, and we're funded by Arts Council England. And what we do is we offer studio space, offering desks, meeting rooms, events and opportunities, all for free to our residents as part of a spirit of generosity and mutual exchange. And most of all, we're a space for people to take risks with embryonic ideas and to make some time for collaboration. So just a few notes before we begin. Please do feel free to move around. We've got some beanbags set up here at the front. You do not have to be scared of them. There's a kitchen back there. You can grab a glass of water or tea or coffee. We have a quiet space just to next to this space. So to my left, to your right, just around the corner there. If you want to pop in there, usually there's some beanbags. Well, I think we might have stolen them. But there are some sofas and things. It's well soundproofed if you need to take a break. And fire exits, we're not expecting a fire drill. If you hear a fire alarm, it's probably real. So the studio team will direct you where to go, but in any event, the fire exits are at the other end of the studio. Again, my left, your right, at either end. And there are accessible toilets and baby change over there in the corridor next to the kitchen. So there'll be a Q&A at the end of this talk. Those of you who are watching online, please pop your questions into the YouTube chat. Laughton will be your voice in the room today. If you're in the building, please raise your hand and we'll send around a microphone so folks at home can hear what you're saying. You can get news on all of our future talks, including one or two for 2025 up there already, on watershed.co.uk/studio, at PM Studio UK on Twitter, at Pervasive Media Studio at mastodon.social on Mastodon, and at Pervasive Media Studio on Instagram. All right, our speaker for today is Furaha Asani. Furaha is a researcher, writer and teacher and Watershed's research lead, looking after a team of producers and action researchers. Today she'll be sharing some learnings from the Alternative Technologies A Just Transition project, which examined technologies and their past, present and future role in climate justice and breakdown, and that explored what the alternatives could be through a process of carefully facilitated design thinking. So please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Furaha.
Hi, everyone. I must say there are more people in this space than I thought would be present on a Friday the 13th in December. So I am really grateful to you all for your time, and I hope that I make this as engaging and as thought-provoking as possible for you all. So before I start, I want to give a content warning because at some point during this talk, I'm going to be speaking about Bristol's history in slave trade. So hopefully all of us know that Bristol was one of the UK's premier slave trade ports. And that is very necessary, and that was necessary for us to have reckoned with during this work that we did. So that's the content warning. And I'm going to start perhaps in a little bit of an unorthodox way by highlighting the delivery team that participated in this work, just because I want everyone to be honored. So we have Amy Densley, Erinma Ochu, and Melissa Blackburn, who were part of our delivery team from the DCRC. Melissa is no longer part of the DCRC. She is the CEO now of Lockleys Neighbourhood Trust. Melissa, we love you. I know that you're watching live. She's at home with COVID. So we're sending you all the love and positive and healing vibes ever. Myself, Jo, Lawatim, Zoe, Tony, and Martin are all members of the studio. Thank you very much to you all for supporting this work, for believing in this work, and for seeing it through and taking it forward. I will be sharing a little bit about how this work is informing kind of different plans, not just in the studio, but throughout the entire organization of Watershed. Okay, so now to the beginning. How did the idea for this work, Alternative Technologies, A Just Transition, come about? Like many plans, I am told, come about in the cafe bar. This is what happened here through a conversation between Jo, who is the studio's executive producer, Dr. Erinma Ochu, who is an associate professor based in immersive media based at UE, and myself. And the reason that we got together for this particular conversation in October, I think it was, October 2023, somewhere around that time, is because around then, Erinma had been part of our studio community for a number of months. They had specifically participated in our Alternative Technologies workshop series that ran between spring and summer of 2023. They felt already a deep investment in the work that we were doing. And this is just a diagram that kind of tries to bring together, this is not all, but this is some of the work that we've done over the past 4 years during the time that I have been research lead in the studio. So Erinma said, basically, and this is paraphrasing, had said to Jo and I that they felt deeply invested in the work that we were doing in the studio. They were very interested in work that falls within the intersection or falls at the intersection of creative technology and climate action. And then they said to us, hey, listen, there are some funds that I have as part of the Engaging Environments program, which was funded by the Natural Environments Research Council, so NERC, and I would like to gift these funds to you. And honestly, we were like, oh my goodness, what? As you probably all know or appreciate that is not usually how funds come about, funds for research. You have to go through very competitive processes. You have deadlines, everyone is kind of pulling their hair out. And here was someone coming to us and saying, hey, I have a significant amount of money, I believe in your work, and I would like to gift this money to you. So tell me what you would like to do at the intersection of creative technology and climate action. So wow, okay. So then we wrote a proposal and we were able to get sign off from NERC via Erinma's Engaging Environments kind of program team. And that's how the work started. But what exactly is the work? So as a delivery team, we got together to start thinking about what does the intersection of climate action and creative technology look like in a place-based context. So what I mean by place-based here is we're thinking about specific geographic locations. So not just being based in Bristol, but being based in Watershed, being based in Pervasive Media Studio, being based at the harbor side. And something that Erinma had said to us was they were very interested in us thinking about a just transition. And that very much aligns with work that we have already been doing. So some people may know that we are signed up as an organization, Watershed, to the Just Transition Declaration. Sorry. I may be getting the terminology around this wrong. But that is work that we have been doing for a number of years. And we've been trying to think about our responsibility as a cultural beacon. Those are not my words, those are words that have been used to describe Watershed. So we try to think about our civic responsibility and our role as a cultural beacon in Bristol towards a just transition. So for those who don't necessarily know what a just transition means, it simply refers to how we move towards a more inclusive and regenerative economy as opposed to what we have societally right now. So yes, thinking about creative technology, thinking about climate action, thinking about a just transition within this studio space, within this building, with its baggage and its history, next to the harbor side. So the next thing we started asking ourselves was, well, who do we want to bring into this program and how do we want to run this inquiry? And we kind of went back and forth. You know, there was a number of mechanisms that we suggested to one another. But what we decided to do was, and you may recognize that this is part of our iterative process in the studio, is if something has worked before, we want to use it again, but we want to make it even better. We had, last year, we had used a process of self-nomination to get people to literally nominate themselves to become resident reps from our community of around 200 residents in the studio. The way that process ran was a number of questions were sent out to residents and a brief for what we were looking for. And if people answered yes to those questions and if the brief interested them, we said to them, nominate yourselves. We got a number of nominations and we literally put all of the names into a gold drum. So the tombola, and 2 names were pulled out. Literally, that's how it was done. And based on that process, 2 things happened. So we tried out self-nomination, but we also tried out random selection. And if you're interested to find out more about random selection and how it works and how we've used it in our processes, we do have a page on our processes tab where you can access a report that was created by Martin and by our talent development lead, Vic Tillotson, in collaboration with Jerwood Arts. So yeah, that's by the way. Anyway, we knew that random selection together with self-nomination had worked successfully for us in the past. And so we decided that that was the route that we were going to use. We knew that we had budget for around 15 people to pay them for up to 4 days each. And what we then did was to create a list of 4 questions. And we sent this out to our resident network. And what we said to people was, if you can answer yes to these 4 questions, respond to us via email and just say, hey, I've answered yes, I want to participate in this program. We're not going to ask you any further questions. What we asked of people were, are you interested in this work? Can you commit to these dates for our workshops? Do you feel like your voice has been marginalized in conversations, especially at the intersection of creative technology and climate action? I'm going to say that phrase quite a lot. And are you ready to grapple with difficult conversations? You must answer yes to all these questions. So as I said, we knew that we had budget for 15 people. And our plan was that if we got, say, 20 people, we would chuck those names into the gold tombola and draw out 15. We got exactly 15 people. So that was amazing. That was really amazing. So what was our methodology? I should have kind of had an inverted slide. Let me do this. Let me skip forward to say these are our participants. An amazing cohort of individuals. Please look them up. They all have profiles on the studio website. Have a look at the work they do. Reach out to them. They are deeply intelligent people. I want to read all their names out. Alicia, Ali, beloved Sarah, Emanuela, Fozia, Ife, Imven, Jackie, Kai, Kashin, Lucy is at the back today, Natalie, Olamide Posi, Roxana, and Tai. So these are the people that have co-created this work with us. So back to the slide before this. Now, what was our methodology? I've explained a little bit about the formation and how we went about the self-nomination process. I should say that if you're interested in kind of looking a little bit further, oh my goodness, we have a baby in the space with us. Thank you, you're so welcome. You are so welcome. Perhaps it's pertinent to say that actually in our workshops, we had a baby. One of our participants brought her baby with her, and he attended all the workshops. And it was amazing. I keep saying this, from the first workshop to the last workshop, we saw him in the pram, and by the last workshop, he was starting to walk. There's something that happens when a baby is in a space. You're very welcome. I think there's the reminder of the next generation. There's a reminder of the future. There's a reminder of us kind of challenging ourselves to do better. Yeah, if you're interested in any of the things that I'm speaking about today, we have a very, very, what is the word? We have a report that gives you all of this information, so all of it is open access. But of course, we do have time for Q&A. So we had 3 workshops in our series, and we designed them to be responsive. And what I mean by that is that we had kind of a rough idea of what we wanted workshops 2 and 3 to be, but we waited to implement workshop 1, took some feedback from there, and then kind of 100%ed the program for workshop 2, and then did the same with workshop 3. So again, we have a report and we do have a multimedia blog. So if there are any questions or you want to use some of the methods that I've spoken about today and adapt that to your own work, there are resources available for you to do that. Okay. So very important also to honor the facilitators who supported this work, because we really and truly couldn't have done this without them. Jaslyn Pinkney, who's the exec producer at Air Giants, held decompression spaces for our participants. So after every single workshop, we had a decompression space that was attended only by participants. It wasn't a compulsory space, but it was a space that operated Chatham House rules. So no member of the delivery team were there. It was very much meant for people to share and to kind of provoke one another and to vent. She did that really efficiently. Rolf Hoyt is an augmented sound artist. I'm going to come back to him in a moment. He facilitated a session in our second workshop. Jasmine Thompson, a very talented illustrator and designer. And if you've ever paid attention to the murals in this space, they're all created via catering. So they are a Bristol-based catering company that deal in vegan and gluten-free food. And it was so delicious. They catered all of our workshops. So just a big thank you to them, and important to spotlight their work as well. So taking a closer look at what we did in our workshops, we spent the first workshop working through our terms of engagement. So kind of talking to one another about exactly how we wanted to be together in the space and how we wanted to be together as a larger collective throughout this entire program. Something else I think to highlight is one of the concepts that had come up in our planning process as a delivery team was thinking about regeneration, of course, because of a just transition, and extraction. And I think what we noticed ourselves doing after a while was treating these like a binary. And at the end of our work, what we have thought about is that perhaps they're a spectrum, perhaps they happen at the same time. Things can be both at once. So based on the feedback from workshop 1 and based on some of the things that we felt were emerging, we designed workshop 2. And we designed it using water kind of as the medium for our conversations, as the entity for our creative provocations. And I've actually reflected on why exactly we used water, and I can't pinpoint the first conversation. Of course, we're situated next to the harbor side. I think there was also something around that time between Erinma and myself speaking about the work of Professor Christina Sharp, who specifically there are 2 books, so In the Wake and Ordinary Notes. And Professor Sharp uses water to kind of describe a lot of the frameworks that speak to the current realities of Black people around the world. So there was something very much about water showing up in a lot of conversations that we were having on an individual level as well as on a collective level. So we decided then to use water as the creative provocation in the place-based context. So again, geography, harborside. And then we kind of spent workshop 3 just doing some reflections and offering thanks back into the space. So I'm just going to have a sip of my water and bring this photo up and give you a couple of seconds to look at this photo. So this is a photo of the harborside, or 2 photos rather, taken roughly 100 years apart. The link is kind of to the right of the building. I don't know if everyone knows this, but these were two separate sheds that were then joined by the link. So whenever I see black and white photos of Watershed, I get mixed feelings, I must say. If you've ever been to Studio 5, which is below us, you will see on the poles the original inscription of the year in which this building was made, 18 something, I can't really remember. I think it's around 200 years old. And we know that this building was used as a storage factory. So just for those who might want to pause and take a breather, especially those who are watching online, I'm going to be speaking about Bristol's history of slave trade. So give me about 3 minutes and then you can come back, check back in. So these are two images of that kind of center around Ralph Hoyt's practice. So Ralph Hoyt was one of our facilitators. Ralph Hoyt describes himself as a sound artist. He is quite humble in not describing, in saying, kind of not describing himself as a historian. I feel like he is a significantly important historian, especially when it comes to Bristol's history. Colston's Last Journey, some of you may be familiar with it, but this is a immersive sound experience that Ralph produced a couple of years ago, and it's free. You can download the app and you can try it out. Give yourself an hour to 2 hours. What Ralph did was to dive into the archives and draw out the manifests of several slave ships that ported in those waters. So at least 9 of them. And what the immersive journey takes you on is you walk through, and as you're listening in your earphones, you are hearing voice actors reading out those manifests. So you're actually listening to ghost ships. And based on your geolocation, that's the right way to describe it, right, Martin? Based on your geolocation, as you're walking around the harbor, you are kind of jumping between ghost ships. So some of the voices are reading manifests directly, and other voices are reading a script that Ralph made based on the archives. So I will say that everything here, I'm pretty sure, is accurate. And the reason I say that Ralph is a historian is because as I was preparing this, I was just thinking about the fact that, and I don't know if you're listening to this, Ralph, but Ralph is, I'll say this directly to him, Ralph, you are actually doing or implementing an ancestral African practice of oral history, telling oral histories. There's something I think very poetic for me in the fact that this is recorded and there are voices here. So if you're able to undertake this journey, I would encourage everyone to do so. And this is a live drawing that Jazz made of Ralph taking a number of people from our collective to the waters with hydrophones to listen to sounds from below the water. And as we were having these conversations, again, I can't really remember when these comments came up, but I know that there was a point in time that I asked or I said, does the water know that it was complicit in slave trade? Does it know what it was forced to mediate? And does it remember? So there's this word coming up of remembering. And one of the prompts that we used, again, in that workshop was a very famous quote from Toni Morrison, who's an ancestor. This image was taken from Future Earth. And Toni Morrison's quote is, "You know, they straightened out the Mississippi River in places to make room for houses and livable acreage. Occasionally, the river floods these places. Floods is the word they use, but in fact, it is not flooding, it is remembering. Remembering where it used to be. All water has a perfect memory and is forever trying to get back to where it was." So again, that question of, does the water remember what it has done? And if we think back to what I had said earlier about us talking about regeneration and extraction, does the water remember what it has extracted? especially from Black people? And is it aware of what it can do to help us redress and repair and its role in regeneration? And I want to share something that's maybe a little bit corny, but just bear with me, because when I was thinking about remembering and how kind of this all feels really philosophical, I thought about, and this next image is from NASA, the water cycle, which is literally water cycling forever and ever and ever. And so it means all of those molecules of water have actually been here before. So they remember. They must remember what they did. And then how do we work with this water? And how do we work with one another? And how do we use different mediums? How do we hold to account different mediums, including ourselves? How do we hold to account, sorry, let me try to say that again so that it's very clear. How do we hold to account different non-sentient mediums? Does that make sense? Hopefully it does. But anyway, one of the things that we did was to ask our collective to send in recordings of their voices based on their reflections just at the right time, because I'm about to play your poem. We asked people to send in their reflections and, you know, poems that came up as a result of the work that we were doing together. And I would like to play Posey's poem for us.
I just walked in at the right time.
So, that's a live illustration of Posey by Jazz. And yeah.
In the heart of Bristol, rivers have weaved their courses for years. Cobbled streets cladded with history's remnants of love, light, and loss. Beneath the arches of ancient frames flow tales of war, voices without names. The Avon winds through underground neighborhoods where unseen souls have convened for generations. Communities with stories seldom told or bold bond with water oh so rich and profound. Where ships of fortune sailed, echoes of the forgotten are unveiled. Sailing from lands afar where water's vital tread began to bind life and struggle towards our new Avon homestead. Immigrants and refugees have always found their way to Bristol shores, bringing customs, memories, and streams of consciousness. The water's dances always accompanied their dreams, pouring their hearts out for mere droplets of acknowledgement. Still, the rain collects and children splash despite the world's neglect. The joy of water, pure and unconstrained, reminds them of even for a moment the freedom they've regained. During periods of Britain's sunnier phases, we sit by the water's edge as it softly sings of renewed hope with each returning burst of sunlight. A testament to how the currents blend in unity on which all life depends. We can only control what we think we can. A humbling flow appears as if it's really in our control at all. Water has no master but the moon and the wind. Yet shadows linger where the rivers bend. Injustice flows where there should be mutual friend. Access to freshness is unequal and clearly divided like the districts of Bristol. For some, the flow of life is still denied. In Bristol's pulse, the water carries on, a symbol of the battles lost and won. It whispers through the streets a common plea for equity, respect, and dignity. So let the Avon's currents pave the way for futures where all voices find their say, where every drop of water, pure and free, reflects the strengths of each community.
Thank you. So for the sake of time, I'm not going to go into detail on this table, but just to say within our report, we did map out a matrix of what we felt we learned across routes, designing comfort, co-production, communication, all of those on those end. And in the report, each and every one of these kind of has a paragraph that we go into detail about. So I think I'm going to leave this here for the sake of time, but I also did want to highlight that something else in our report that we've included is a toolkit with 3 of the things that we feel could be adaptable to everyone's to work in certain contexts. So turning your terms of engagement into a contract of care, co-creating nourishing workshop spaces, and using self-nomination to curate a group. So if you're interested in the self-nomination process that I described, we explain it fully in the report, and we also kind of make some suggestions about how you can use that in your own work. So I would like to play another reflection from another member of our collective, and this is Jackie, again, a live illustration from Jazz.
One of the most useful things was realising the broad definition of technologies and using a tool to help you do something better. I think there were moments when I felt like the person who knew nothing in the room, but I felt able in that environment to ask naive questions and be curious and be amongst people who understood this so much better than me. And I did come away thinking, oh my God, I want an app to organise the bus service rather than having to do it manually. Maybe I will always be a non-native modern technology user, but it felt a little bit more comfortable. It's a long journey for someone to go from not really feeling any confidence in technology to growing confidence in technology.
Great. Something else, so now I've moved kind of to the section of the talk where I'm just picking out things to highlight. Something else to say is this is a drawing of Emanuela, part of our collective. And when we started the program, we had asked people what we could do to optimize accessibility for them so that they felt as comfortable as possible. And one of the things that sorry, I didn't realize I was tapping the microphone. One of the things that Emanuela had said to us was she highlighted a study that was produced from Rising Arts Agency together with Rosanna Diaz called Resourcing Racial Justice. So that piece of work, and again, that's an open access report that you can look up if you're interested. That piece of work says that if you are asking people to participate in a program based on their lived experience and asking them to draw on their lived experience to enrich your program, you should be resourcing their rest. And so Emanuela said, hey, do you have enough resource to pay us for rest? And actually we did. So what we ended up doing was we paid people for 3 days worth of work and at the same rate for 1 day of rest. We've published that as well in our report. And because of this practice, following the race riots that happened earlier this year in the summer, Watershed then extended to members of staff who were affected by those race riots 1 day of rest, so separate from annual leave. And actually, following that, we now have it written into policy that there is rest for all members of staff that can be accessed. So again, there's guidance for this, but how it works is people are able to reach out to our HR based on certain criteria, certain experiences that they feel they've had, and say, I would like to make use of up to 3 days of rest, which is what we're allotted per year. And again, this is separate from annual leave. So the reason that I've included this is just to highlight that this work has actually had a positive impact on Watershed policy. And it has been referenced in some of the funding applications, successful even, including a recent one that we got from the National Lottery Heritage Fund. So it is very much challenging and provoking our thinking, not just within the studio, but wider in the wider organization. So the third and last video that I want to play is from Jo, who is our exec producer, and these are some of her reflections from our work.
My maybe technology was the hypnosis that I was going through as our time together started, to try and move past a phobia of flying, of being trapped. I shared my reflections with the group about how, using a smartphone app, I was in a process of trying to shift some of the connections of my brain, to create new associations between experience and emotion. And might that be an exercise in recoding my thoughts, a kind of if this then that set of neural instructions that sought to rewire my own experience of fear? We talked about where the body ends and technology begins, the ways in which that boundary gets blurred, and I thought about what all this meant for our sense of humanness. And now I'm wondering about the structures of our conversations, the ways in which we meet each other, whether we might together somehow reprogram our encounters in order to relocate fear within our collective experience. I think I saw some glimpses, some moments where relief, comfort, trust and love was felt lurking beneath signals of danger, the traces of new pathways growing. We didn't get there this time, but might these glimpses have been the seeds of a technology of solidarity? Maybe.
So, perhaps this is an odd place to kind of end the talk, but let me make this one up and say this represents how the work sort of ended and didn't really end. It's still ongoing, and on this slide I just have so there are three things here. Again, to say that our report is available for you on the website, on the Studio Processes webpage. We also have our multimedia blog where you can listen to some more recordings and you can look at some more live illustrations done by Jazz. And something else that we thought would be fun was to ask our collective to send in suggestions for songs that they felt represented the work that we did together. And so if you scan that QR code, that will take you to the playlist. Or you can just look up my name, Furaha Asani. It's like the only public playlist on my Spotify. So you can do it that way. Not that my other playlists aren't good, but yeah. Now I want to ask for something really, really cheeky. Feel free to ignore. But I'm just asking because I can. We have, oh my gosh. We have made a pitch to South by Southwest London to do some more talking that is hopefully even more engaging than what I've done today, because it's not just going to be me. That looks a little bit sad because just voted +1, that's me. But if you feel inclined to do so, and there are other brilliant talks, of course. I know that there are some people in this space who themselves have made pitches to South by Southwest London. But yeah, if you feel inclined to do so, please do think about voting for us. We are in the 2050 Future Thinking category. And this is a final slide. So this is the mural representing all of our work. Again, it's available online. This doesn't even cover all of the work that emerged, all of the live illustration that Jazz did, but it's just a stunning, stunning, stunning piece. So I'm going to leave it up here and invite people to ask questions, both in the room and online. I think we can also take some comments. We don't have to, we don't have to just take questions. We'll open it up. It could be that, some people feel like sharing something. There could be work that you're doing that is aligned to this. So I will say we can take those as well, not just questions. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Furaha. These beanbags are great, but not that easy to get out of in a hurry. Do we have any questions from the room? Anyone want to kick us off? Anybody? I'm going to stare at you until somebody has a question. Duncan's got a question.
I was just wondering about if you had any examples. You talked really early on about how this has impacted processes here or on other projects. I just wondered if you had any examples of what's carried on from this into other things you're doing.
Yeah. Thanks for that question. Actually, one of the things that we were running kind of in a staggered way was the More Than AI sandbox series, and that was produced by Emma. And Emma had already early on said that she was very interested in the way we ran our terms of engagement collation, and would we be able to support? And that was something that she then took on board, and we did that basically in that workshop series. And I think it's also important to say that we weren't the ones that started the very specific terms of engagement collation workshop in the studio. Actually, that was Jo many, many, many years ago. And so Jo produced a report like a decade ago. And based on that report, we then iterated. And based on what we did and based on what Emma did, we then had even new learnings. It's just we had already, I think, published the report by then. So every time we're doing it, we're learning something more. And that's literally just one example. But to answer your question, what tends to happen here is something, again, like, oh, Martin and Vic used, and Joe actually used self-nomination for our studio reps. Why don't we try and adapt it and use it in this way? That is so typical in this space. Everything overlaps, and we kind of just borrow ideas and adapt them in different context-specific ways. So over to you. If we just ask you to, and then over to Posey after that. We use the microphones just for the people online, so yeah.
Thanks. Was just looking at the report, the PDF. Is this mural available to download somewhere to see it in more detail?
Oh, as a mural itself, actually. So it is on the, it's in the multimedia blog, yes. Yes. So if you go to one of our pages, there's kind of a link to... That's not a really good answer. Yes, the mural is available at the bottom of our multimedia blog.
Cool.
Yeah.
Posse, I think.
Yeah, very great to be involved. Absolute honor. And I guess just from looking at the research and data that's come out of it, and it very clearly showing the need in the sense of equality and having these kind of conversations. The challenges that I often face and feel myself, particularly around when it comes to working in creative spaces, traditional industrial spaces, and adaptable spaces such as this one in itself, where we have a lot of incredibly talented creatives and thinkers, academics, but oftentimes when it comes to inequality and access, that generally tends to be where the conversation dismantles and falls apart. So it's not to say people aren't intelligent, but I feel we have big ideas, but in the sense of actually implementing something that benefits a wider cohort as opposed to more kind of traditional patriarchal frameworks. How can we start to normalize this as a conversation and bringing it into our spaces, which in a traditional sense generally tend to be more reluctant to explore access inequality. And now that we're seeing this, whether on an economic scale, individually, as well as I guess you can almost say globally as well. Mm-hmm. Like, how do we really start to implement these programs and encourage these conversations and get these figures within these establishments to at least start considering and thinking outside the box of how we can really implement and engage and support one another more effectively?
Mm-hmm. So I have two versions of an answer for you. The first I won't elaborate on is my personal view is I think we need radical approaches. That's where I'll leave that. There are two things that come to my mind as research lead, and this is based on conversations and that we have been having as a wider studio team. The two things that we are thinking about is what does accountability look like? So holding ourselves as, again, that cultural beacon to account. Some of this is captured in our reflections in the reports to say, like, even in doing this work, there were tensions that arose, and I'll just give you an example of one, the way whiteness shows up in research and in creative production. And that was something that we felt very important, all of us as a delivery team, that we needed to capture in the report. The second thing is methods of funding. Who gets money and how do people get money? So back to the beginning of this, if Erinma had not essentially invested, and if NERC hadn't signed it off in that way, we likely would not have been able to do this work to the extent of freedom and even being able to pay for rest days. You know, so there's something here around looking to funders and thinking about holding them to account about the kind of work that they value. I realize that in saying this, again, this is Watershed, we do have relative power. We are quite a powerful and influential organization, and in this sense, we become the funder, which again, Jo has written about the dynamic of us receiving funding and still being funders into kind of seeding funding into our community. So I think there are levels of accountability and also funding. What kind of knowledge production is valued? So let me add a third one, sorry, is to say, what kind of knowledge is valued, what kind of knowledge production. So we aren't an official independent research organization. At the same time, we very much know that a lot of the work that happens here is research. It is valid research. The research by practice that happens in our community of practice is also valid research. And yet we face time and again, many people in our studio community, facing barriers in accessing funding from all of these big funders. So at the end of the day, it's a thing of who is valued. How do we hold ourselves to account to ensure that when we have access to resource, we're able to keep it flowing and reinvesting in our community and keeping our community open so that more and more people can access it. I don't know if that's really answered your question.
100%, and I totally agree. I find like at the end of the day, I think a lot of us are all in the same battle, and I'm not trying to say anyone is inherently worse off. I think we're just in this system that has been, and it's not a new system. I think if anything, we're becoming more aware of the challenges around access and when it comes to funding particularly, because you can have a great idea, but inevitably, how do you fund it? And how do you allow that to keep you consistent in the process of discovering and exploring ideas and concepts? So I feel, it does boil back to the understanding of funders and what kind of framework, what kind of conversations, what kind of progression are we trying to encourage in our spaces?
Yeah.
I think you said it great.
Thank you. I will say, I don't think it's controversial to say particular people are worse off. The evidence does show multiple marginalization is a thing.
I'm trying to contain myself.
I think it's absolutely fine to say that there are people who are a little bit more marginalized in one way or another. We're not doing Oppression Olympics. We're not trying to. It is evidence-based.
I love that.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? We got one online.
One online, and then we have one here in the class.
Hey, thanks for that. Melissa Blackburn would like... Wow, everyone just turned around, sorry. Hi, guys. Melissa Blackburn would like to know what's next for this work.
Oh, can I say something quickly about Scenic Route? Am I allowed to? Is that... Okay. So actually, we had already, as a delivery team, been discussing what is next. And we are still in the process of trying to find the right funder for what is next. But this work, together with some of the work that we have been doing with our partners, some of who are in the room here, Verity as well, some of the work that George has been doing with that has informed and has challenged us in thinking about the pace at which we do work. And the concept that we have come up with is the scenic route. So how do we ensure that we can do work at a slower pace, give ourselves time to rest, so that's embedded already into our programming, and have enough resource again, because there's something about us knowing that we have this financial buffering to be able to say, hey, yeah, we can pay you for rest, and hey, we can do this, and hey, we can order bean bags so that, we make our workshop space more comfortable. That is kind of, even if I'm not comparing bean bags to people's rest, don't get me wrong. At the same time, I do think that does show like different levels of material change that we're able to implement. And we are very much looking for, and if you are watching this now or in the future and you have access to give us the money, we are looking for funds that will enable us to be able to sow back again into our community and to be able to do work at a slower pace. We do brilliant work. The evidence is there, right? So we will continue to do brilliant work, and we want to do it by taking the scenic route. And that's going to have many manifestations, not just from the research team, but hopefully you'll see it across all of our work. And we hope also that will inject into the wider organization as well. Love you, Melissa. We had a question here.
Actually, it follows on really nicely from what you were just saying there, actually, because I think one of the things you didn't really touch on in the talk was it's clearly a very sort of decentralized and emergent kind of piece of work. And I was just really curious if there were any highlights about takeaways in terms of the sort of ripple through to the general community, And I think often you can have those outcomes which can be really impactful, but they're sort of secondary or tertiary effects, I guess.
Yeah.
So I was just really interested if you'd done any work to kind of capture that and understand that ripple effect almost in order to be able to, I guess, characterising it. And it comes back to your funding point, actually. I mean, I think the value probably multiplies through a community. So I guess it's useful to capture it, but also just curious about what kinds of effects you see once this has been filtered through all of these incredible people's brains and pops out the other end, I guess, in other projects.
I think that's a very, very good question. We have a couple of weeks ago, we had to give a update to the funders. So the Natural Environments Research Council, and we had to speak to legacy because that's something that they're very interested in. And that was an opportunity for us to kind of speak to the work that our collective continues to do, minus us as a delivery team, so those 15 brilliant individuals. Something that we did as a delivery team is avail ourselves for one-to-ones with people who wanted to, from this collective of 15, with people who wanted to speak to us about different things. So for instance, I'm interested in research. Can you tell me a little bit about research methodologies? I'm interested in studying. One of our producers has now gone on, she's literally now in Barcelona, doing a master's in degrowth. So in terms of the legacy of this work, it sounds a bit maybe cliche to say, but the truth is it is in the people. Thank you. It's in the people that we've been able to support. I think something that we are quite cautious about, which is not just from this project, but other projects as well, is to what extent we're able to say the things that people have gone on to do are as a result of ourselves. Something that we didn't have in place, which we may want to consider in future, is some kind of evaluation, like a formal evaluation, so that we can check in with people 6 months down the line and further down the line about how they've been able to grow in their own careers. And ultimately, if we're saying this is about a just transition, it means like it's based in community, right? So what impact have they had on their communities? What impact have we as producers beyond Watershed had on our own community? So I think a more kind of a better answer would have been, I would have been able to give you a better answer if we actually had an evaluation, which I don't necessarily think, we didn't really think about it that way. But I can tell you anecdotally that indeed members of our collective have been able to use these learnings, and we've kept in touch with people, and we're supporting people in their own creative practice and production, and people are continuing to do brilliant work. Sorry, that seems very like, but it's the truth.
Thank you.
That's okay.
Any other last questions from anyone? Well, if not, I think we'll say thank you to Furaha.
Thank you.
I've lost my script. All right, before you all go, if you'd like to find out more what we do, please come find one of the studio team. Studio team, give us a wave. There's quite a few of us here supporting Furaha. Or if you're watching online, you can drop us a line at studio@watershed.co.uk with any questions. This is the last lunchtime talk of the year. We'll be back in January with a whole bunch of more stuff, so please do join us then. Thank you all for being here today, and we'll see you again next year.